it's just the universal truth. Like the people that I know that are most successful as far as how, traditional definition of success, they're the biggest givers and they are financially rewarded because people want to work with givers. Like it just is what it is.
Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. Now, if you really break down what I do in my coaching world with men is, and what we talk about here quite a bit on the podcast is leadership. What I do and what my guest does that's coming up here is guide people to become more effective leaders, not only in their business, but in their homes. So I never miss an opportunity to talk about personal improvement and leadership. So let's do a little of that today. So welcome to the podcast, Susan Power. She is the founder and CEO of Power Up Leadership, a boutique leadership coaching advisory company in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. So you have to welcome one of our Canadian friends to the podcast. We have many. She has over 20 years of coaching and supporting leaders to become more effective leaders in life. Susan, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Susan, start with this. First of all, I love the name of your business, Power Up. Power Up. That gets me pumped up and excited right off the bat. So, how did you find your way into leadership development and working with leaders?
I came from a corporate background, 20 years in corporate human resources. And one day, my boss at the time came to me and said, Susan, you are leading HR for the division. We need your help in fixing our leadership effectiveness problem. Because often people be promoted to a people manager role, they'd be strong technically, and they'd flounder to figure out their way. So it got me looking into coaching and looking into, well, how do you make a leader effective when they're leading people for the first time? And that really piqued my interest in the coaching space because it's a big change transformation to get people to shift from delivering the work to leading a team and engaging and inspiring the team to do the work.
Yeah.
So I just found the area fascinating and that kind of took off from there.
Now, big shout out to all our HR people. I've been telling Susan, my wife's been in HR for, gosh, she's probably been in it for, a good 20 years now. So God bless everybody in human resources. That is a tough gig, but it does open up that opportunity to dive into leadership. And what have you seen be people's biggest challenges as it relates to, and it might encompass both a leader in an organization or a leader in life? What do you think some of the bigger challenges are?
It's a really great question, Mike. And there's so many of them that can come up, right? Like we're
Yeah,
pretty interesting creatures as human beings that sometimes we create a lot of our own problems inadvertently
yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
I think. But when I'm thinking about leading people in the workplace specifically, I think the biggest mistake I've seen is leaders underestimate the potential, the intelligence, the capabilities of their people.
Mm,
And they don't always understand their role in coaching them up and leading them and directing the work and collaborating with them. So I think it's underestimating really what their team is capable of because even if they don't say that to their team that
yeah,
you messed up or you're not capable, like people don't say that, but
yeah,
the team can feel that
yeah.
energy off of the leader based on what they give them for work, how they communicate. And I think it's those beliefs and mindsets that trip up a lot of leaders.
Yeah, no question. Why do you think that we leaders, we'll use that term for this podcast. Why do you think leaders underestimate people?
It's a really, really, I mean, it's a basic question, but it's a very
Why?
good question. Why do people
Yeah,
underestimate
why would
people?
we want to do that to the people we lead? But we do. I'm just kind of curious what you think.
I think that people fill in the blanks with their own assumptions sometimes, and they incorrectly make assumptions about others when they're working with them or even interacting with them outside of work. So I think of the example when people are communicating with children, sometimes they don't realize how much children know. Like I'm thinking of my two sons, 13 and 10, right? And they watch everything on YouTube. Like they understand the whole history of Rome to a level of
Yeah.
detail that would match any grown-up man out there, and they think about it daily. Like the history of Rome is a big topic at my dinner table. Fascinating topic. But some people underestimate children, right? When they're communicating with children, for instance, and they think, what could they know? They're 10 years old. Like, what could they know about the world? And it's the same in the workplace. If someone is leading a team and say they have, say, a Gen Z employee that's just out of university, oh, they don't have 20 years experience. What could they know? How could they possibly get this done? And to me, that's a very, very, very slippery slope to make those assumptions.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we recently did a podcast with a gentleman by the name of Bob Tiede, and Bob wrote a book. Was part of. He's written several books on asking questions, including a book called "Leading with Questions: How Leaders Discover Powerful Answers by Knowing How and What to Ask." And what was interesting about that was we got into a similar discussion, and you know, as I'm hearing you talk about making these assumptions, what was interesting is Bob said, how much more powerful would it be if you were asking questions rather than, in this case, you're saying making assumptions or demanding that your employees do something? In other words, what could we uncover? And this is the beauty of children, I think, in terms of what you're talking about, because they'll just ask questions like crazy, right?
Mhm.
But we get in the workplace and there's this underlying thing that, well, you're supposed to know the answer. And if you ask the question, well, you
Mhm.
maybe maybe you need to be replaced. It, how do you feel about that? I mean, if we were asking more questions on how to do things, which the younger generation, I think, really likes that from what I understand. I don't know. I'm getting old, so,
Me
but
too.
yeah, but I mean, how do you
Yeah.
feel about that? I'm just kinda throwing that out since we're talking about the assumptions people make.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the quality of the questions we ask demonstrate our level of expertise because it defines the problem. So asking a really smart question, I think to me illustrates, wow, like this is going to be a good experience working with this person because it will change the whole focus of the conversation and help you define what problem we're going to solve based on whatever question they ask. So I think it's a really good point that you bring up, that making a safe environment where people are encouraged to be curious and ask questions is the best environment. And really, it's a coaching environment because coaching is all
Yeah.
about asking powerful questions.
Right.
So it should be irrespective of job title, going from both directions, upward, downward, across peer levels. And imagine how much less time would be wasted in meetings if people were just focused on asking the right questions.
Yeah, and getting right, yeah, an extensive amount of time. What's your favorite question to ask?
My favorite question to ask a coaching client, is that
Yeah,
what you're
sure,
asking?
sure.
My favorite question to ask would be, what does your ideal day look like? Because I think if you're having a conversation with someone, say they're a new client, you can learn a lot about their motivations,
Yeah.
what's most important to them, how they think in terms of structuring their time. So I think, what does your ideal day look like? Your ideal year opens up possibilities to people. And it's something we don't ask ourselves as frequently as we should.
Why don't we ask that? I know the answer to the I know the answer to the question. I'm asking it for you, but I will tell you that one of the bigger focuses for 2024 for me is I got away from my planner and having a system, and I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants towards the tail end of the year, and I knew it. I knew it. And as a result, I wasn't getting my ideal day. And
Mhm.
and it was kind of driving me a little bonkers. And so for 2024, my wife asked me coming into the year, she said, "Well, what are you going to change this year?" And I actually had my planner with me, and I said, "This baby right here is going with me everywhere, everywhere." Why why do we allow things to get away from us and not enjoy our ideal day?
Yeah, I think the example you share from your own life, Mike, is one that would resonate with a lot of your listeners because the phone rings, something unexpected happens, you get pulled into a meeting with a client or a personal challenge, like things pull us away from that focus, right? It's just the way life is. So I think when I think of an ideal day, one thing that I always try to do in my life and encourage others to do is to read through their big yearly goals 3 to 5 times a day, to put it on their phone, maybe in OneNote or on their desktop, whatever, and just read through it. If you're in line at the grocery store, pull out your phone, read through your health goals, your finance goals, your personal, your professional goals, because your brain will find a way to make those happen.
Yeah.
And like 3 to 5 times a day. Most people set them beginning of 2024. They go into a drawer in their desk and then they pull them out and then you'll say, shit, like I didn't do this, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. In fact, one of the things that I've done this year, and I've not always been good about this, but I did this towards the tail end of next year, right to nobody can see this on screen, but it's where I can see it, is have a vision board over there where I can immediately look over and see pictures of things I want. Now, some of those are long range and some of them are short range. I would really like that golf simulator in my house sooner than later, but that,
Cool.
that's that's beside the point. Um, but I do think it's imperative, and I actually took a picture of that too. So to your point, I hate lines. That's part of my shadow. I do not like standing in lines. It makes me very angry and impatient. However, I have a picture of my vision board, and it's pretty easy when I feel myself getting anxious to just pull that up and
Mhm.
go, wait, what are you really focused on here? Because you have no control over this line. You're just a
Yep,
person standing in it.
yep.
And I think that those are really important things to consider, not just if you're a leader, but for yourself, because it's going to be hard to be a leader, I think, if you're just angry and upset all the time, because people feed off that, like that power of intention that you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And like when you say that, I think of one of the intentions I've set for myself personally this year is to have more fun. And, working mom, entrepreneur,
Yeah.
been really hustling the past 6 years to scale a business. And I've had a bunch of coaching calls. So on my vision board, I need to figure out what that image is for fun. But I've had some coaching calls and figuring out for myself, how do you integrate that into your day-to-day life? So for you, maybe it's your golf simulator. For me, I've been using music and just like easy things that are in my house that I have access to right now that I can just flip the switch. But I'm curious what else is on your vision board for yourself?
Oh, wow. Look at you. Well, I've got some podcast goals out there. I won't get we'll achieve movement with those goals. I'm not going to get to where I want to get to this year. I have SUV on there. I actually have a picture of a guy on stage speaking in front of a huge audience
Mhm.
because I want to do more speaking. I've got a couple of my books on there because I want to do more authoring. So I have a picture of a book signing going on, which is really
Awesome.
cool. And of course, house. You got to have your dream house on there. And then with one of the organizations I'm with, I'm a big, huge race car driving fan, IndyCar specifically, and I've got about a 4-year goal to actually sponsor a race car at the Indy 500. So I mean,
That's
those now
cool.
that is a big goal right there.
You'll
Because
get there. Have you
but
seen the new Ferrari movie?
no, but that is on my radar screen. So there's a bunch of stuff like that, and I really, if I'm sitting here at my desk and something comes up or something goes awry, or a challenge comes my way, I find it really important to just kind of glance over there and go,
Mhm.
you can't bite that elephant all at once. It's about those bite-sized chunks, which is another reason why on my people are going to think I'm nuts that I'm and tell saying I have right on my computer 1% every day because it's important to know that you just take a little bit every day to take you where
I'm
you
with
want to
you.
go. And I've seen that pay. The podcast is a perfect example of that because I just show up, I do my thing. We get the
Mhm.
podcast out on a weekly basis, and it's allowed me to meet amazing people like you. And in a lot of cases, what has come out of that is strategic partnerships,
Mhm.
collaborations, and it's just been amazing. And all of that starts with just showing up every day to do a little bit more to get me to where I want to go. And I think that's true of every leader.
I think you're right. It's putting out this universal intelligence, this energy out into the world where things it attracts things to you that you
Yes.
don't even you couldn't preconceive, right? Like I'll give you an example. I do a podcast myself called Inspired Leadership where we interview amazing leaders and learn about their leadership story and how they lead in their roles effectively. And one girl had listened to the podcast. She brought on a bunch of guests for us, but to make a long story short, we're now partnering with her organization where she works at, the Princess Trust of Canada, which is King Charles philanthropy arm in Canada. And we're offering a emerging leadership coaching scholarship. So pro bono, my firm's dedicating 5 hours of ICF, International Coaching Federation, coaching sessions and assessment. The scholarship winner gets the recognition of being selected, but we're promoting it with the Princess Trust to get the word out there. And it's for 18 to 30-year-olds, emerging leaders, equity deserving youth. And this never would have happened if she hadn't heard our podcast and we
Yeah.
met when I was in Toronto. And like, I would never think I'm reaching out to the Princess Trust of Canada. Like, it wouldn't be on my radar because it just, wasn't part of my strategic plan, but it just organically, you build relationships, right?
Well, and I think what that does is lead to confidence when those things happen more than anything. I'm crazy enough at this point where I might reach out to something like that as a result of the confidence you start building those partnerships and you start having
Mhm.
great people come into your life. And really it stems from, and I think this is an important thing to point out, that that positivity and that intention that you have to be in the light is what radiates out into the world. And when that starts happening, these people do come to you. And then the other thing that happens is I think, well, I'm going to reach out to something big and just see what
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what happens when you do that. Like you actually get phone calls back or people return your emails and you're
Yeah.
like, I didn't think that could happen, but it can happen.
I
And
agree.
yeah, and I think we need to encourage more of that, because I, quite honestly, was, the type of for a while in my life was that person that was like, "Man, that's crap. And those people are full of it. They're just writing books. There's no way that's true." But it's true, isn't it?
I think people feed off of energy and, producing a podcast like Truman Podcast
Yeah.
puts out a valuable service to the world and attracts certain people to you, certain opportunities. And I agree with you, like it makes sense to be bold. I guess my point was
Mm.
sometimes there, I believe there's a broader plan, call it universal intelligence, God, whatever, that we can't always anticipate how the impact of something we're doing will resonate with someone and it just kind of like it's meant to happen. I believe in that things come to you for a reason. So I agree. Reach out to those big
Yeah.
partnerships, etc., but be open to serendipity and things that you don't pre-plan.
Well, along that lines, what are maybe 2 or 3 events that have most shaped your life as a result of kind of following your intention?
Oh, that's
Putting
a
you on the spot.
yeah. 2 or 3 events that have shaped my
Well,
life by
maybe 1. You can give me 1, we don't need.
Well, the one that immediately comes to mind is being part of an entrepreneur community. It's called Elite Entrepreneurs, and it's led by a gentleman by the name of Dan Martell. He's a SaaS entrepreneur, and he's sold and exited 3 businesses. Really big name out there on social. He's worth following for sure. And it's just this community of entrepreneurs coming together and learning from each other. And he leads a weekly call on Zoom each week and then opens it to Q&A.
Mm,
So I've really gotten so much out of that program. And one thing that is top of mind for me that shapes how I think and lead each day is being of service to other people. So I always felt like I was doing that in my work because I love what I do. But I feel like he's taken it to a whole new level just by seeing him as a world class person lead this
yeah,
program. And like he says, for instance, he'll pray before he gets on the call that he can channel basically what we need as entrepreneurs on this call, and he doesn't need to do this, like, he doesn't need to show up every week for this call, but he does, and it's amazing. And I've learned so much through it. I know it totally shapes how I show up for my clients. And I don't even care anymore if I make the sale, if I'm on a sales call. I'm just
yeah.
like, can I help this person? Because if I can't, I do not want to work with them because otherwise I'm not delivering anything for the money. So anyways, I wouldn't have done that a year ago. If I'm being completely honest, I'd be like, I
Wow,
want to make
yeah.
the sale. But now it's like, can I help them? Like, really help them? If not, I don't wanna work.
So how does being in, and I love the idea of being in service. I've actually said that to people, and that they asked me what that meant, and I thought, "Oh, okay, what am I missing here?" But being in service to people, I mean, really being a giver and showing up for people, I think is a big deal in a world that has been maybe not as trusting. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, many of them political that I'm not gonna get into on the podcast. It's very easy to question our world, uh, leaders, at this point, not just politically, but in business as well. There's been countless things that have gone on in business over the years that would lead us to be
Yeah,
suspicious of things. But what is being in service to others mean to you?
yeah. Yeah, I agree. People are not always 100% trusting in that regard, but being of service to me means really figuring out what the other person most needs out of the interaction, the relationship, and just being authentic and sharing what you can do to help them, or if not, just putting them in contact with who they need that could better serve them. So it's really coming back full circle to asking the right question. It's really seeking to understand, well, what outcome are you trying to get from this, or what is been the challenges, and not assuming that you have the solution. Like, it's that discovery process of really, what is it? Because sometimes people have trouble articulating what it is that they really need. So if you're asking them the right question, it can help them figure out, well, why did I think I needed coaching, for instance? Why did I think I needed this? What prompted this you reaching out to me? Like that sort of thing, really seeking to understand.
I love that phrase. If I'm not mistaken, a fellow Canadian of yours, Stephen Covey, I think, didn't Dr. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits talk about seeking to understand. I'm really winging it here, going off memory, but I
I think
recall
so.
that.
20 years ago, I read that book. I should pick it up again. It's definitely worth a second
Well,
read, but
it's
it sounds
funny.
familiar.
Isn't it funny? You hear these little phrases sometimes and you're like, boy, yeah, that's right out of Stephen Covey's, but like think with the end in mind,
Yeah.
it is along that lines. And it's something that he talked about. And I think when we think with the end in mind, it really opens up this idea of being of service to others.
Mhm.
That's so great. It's just really important because, especially in the coaching world where we're helping people, if I come into this and I feel like I need to make a sale, I feel like people are going to sniff it out in a hurry. Now, I
100%.
recently had somebody contacted me. I talked with them 6 months ago. This person had a lot going on in their life. It was very clear to me at that point they needed somebody to come walk alongside them. I laid out what I do. 6 months later, they contacted me.
Mhm.
Now, it's of no surprise to me that they contacted me back because oftentimes it's a great challenge that we try to go it alone. Now, as men, we will do that. We will try to go it alone. And, I'm grateful that this person has contacted me back because it's really hard to go it alone.
Mm.
And I think that they finally came to that conclusion. And so I say all that to say, I was just trying to be in service and not sell somebody, knowing that I'm going
Mhm.
to give you, here's the plan, and you can take it or leave it now, or you can try to do it by yourself. And I think most people find out, you know, it's tough. It's tough to go it alone.
Mm.
And one of the biggest things that I've learned in leadership is that I don't need to go it alone, and I want that support system around me. Now I need to build that by asking great questions and supporting the people around me so
Mhm.
that they can help me. But man, life's good when you're giving and in service with others.
Yeah, and I think that that's 100% right. You get what you give. Not that that's a reason to give, but it's just the universal truth. Like the people that I know that are most successful as far as how, traditional definition of success, they're the biggest givers and they are financially rewarded because people want to work with givers. Like it just is what it is. And I think that's the beauty of it, that they are rewarded for that. And really it's just a great thing that comes full circle like that. So I love that example you shared, that the person came back 6 months earlier because they probably sensed that from you. And when you talk about men having trouble, asking for help, wanting to go alone, what would you suggest to men to make it easier for them to ask for help?
And I think this is probably true of all of us. Quite honestly, I could coach men or women. I just choose to coach men because I know what I went through. And what I find most commonly is that, generally speaking, and do this probably a little bit more than women do this, men will bury their feelings and we'll hope that we can fight through it. And we'll try to fight through it alone. But a lot of times we'll bury stuff and we hope that we never have to deal with it. And what
Mhm.
I've commonly found is that eventually you're going to have to deal with it, and you probably are dealing with it. And it's probably showing up in the form of not having the relationships around you that you want, whether in your personal life or in your business life. And typically we can fake it for a little while, but these things have a weird way of catching up to us because things happen in life. You know, um, Death occurs. Children get older. And there's just all kinds of things. But I really feel like men bury their feelings. We hope we don't have to uh, deal with it. But I think one of the more freeing things and I've gone through this myself, and I've seen a lot of men go through this. One of the more freeing things that you can do is actually to take a look in the mirror and deal with whatever challenge that you're dealing with, and come up with answers and solutions to help move you forward and just release
Mm,
what's going on. And it helps to have a good faith life if you do that, in my opinion,
yeah,
or
that
some
makes
kind of
sense.
spiritual life. But I think it's a very freeing experience to be open to dealing with those challenges that are in front of you because it's not an authentic way to lead. So
Mhm.
anger is one that comes up a lot for men. If you're angry, it probably shows up at work one way or another.
Yeah,
And if
in
it
your
shows
body
up,
language,
yeah.
right?
And so if it shows up at work, if people don't want to be led by you. If they think you're gonna blow your stack if they do something wrong, they're gonna walk on eggshells all the time. How many
Yeah.
times have you heard that in HR, right? A
Mhm.
lot, a
Yeah.
lot. And so, anger's that's an easy one because, so many guys wanna bring up, being angry. But anyway, yeah, I think that the most important thing
Mhm.
to summarize is you're gonna have to take a look in the mirror and deal with those challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, I would love that, and part of it, I think of the corporate putting on your armor type of, idea that you see in corporate
Yeah.
America that, which has been traditionally more men in leadership roles, that it's not a wonder, right, that they bury their feelings and
Yeah.
they don't wanna, but I think the tide has turned on that. So if men can get more comfortable, or women, either or, sharing their feelings in the workplace, that's the type of leader that inspires people and
Yeah.
that connects on a human level
Mm,
with people, because most decisions are made based on emotions. Do I want to work for this person? What do I want to accomplish in my life and career? We can put the logic down, but
yeah.
at the end of the day, it comes down to an emotion and how you feel about something. So communicating with emotion, it just seems to go hand in hand.
I relate to that. I've been there. I try to focus now more on people's deeds and separate the emotion out of it. That's something I've done a lot of work on. It's something I would encourage leaders to work on. What are the deeds showing up in this person versus the emotion? It always circles back to emotion because we're just emotional people.
Mhm.
Um, as a whole, I would encourage people to separate the two. That's just my view of it.
What do you mean separate the deed from the emotion? Can you give me an example?
So, you may have the workplace is a good one. So you may have a person who shows up on a daily basis and they're not performing. And let's say you go to do a urine review and the person doesn't get a good review, and so they're angry, they're upset, and they're blaming everybody but themselves. Now you've got an emotional situation, but the reality is they're not performing well on a daily basis. They don't show up, consistent in their
Mhm,
work. And what is easy to get caught up in, that was an easy one because it's just the end of the year. And so these things happen a lot as people have their reviews and things like that. It's easy to get in a situation as a leader where you get caught up in their emotion and then
mhm,
you start yelling back and forth, right?
mhm.
Versus pausing for a second to take a breath and go, okay, I'm not going to get caught in this game. We're just going to stay focused on the conversation. I'm not going to have a back and forth. I hope that's a good example. I mean, I know you've probably seen this a lot where people get caught up in the emotion of the situation and things really get sideways.
Definitely, and I think of what I've seen other leaders do is try to ignore that emotion because they're focused on, "Okay, I'm gonna stick to the facts and go through, here's what you did well, here's what you didn't do well, what are we gonna do about it?" But in my mind, the non-performing employee doesn't hear a word pass once they get into that anxious,
Yeah.
angry stage. So the leader, a better response would be for the leader to call out, "You seem really upset by this.
Yeah.
Like,
Just
how are you
call it.
feeling?" Right? So basically get rid of that anxiety or lower it a bit so you can have a fruitful conversation, because just burying their emotion under the rug, the employee's emotion, the conversation is just going to probably escalate otherwise.
I think a good story and a nice anecdote there helps too, you know. Sometimes it softens a softens the situation, right? You know, if you're able to go, hey, you know, I remember once in my career where this happened to me, and blah 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 blah.
Mhm,
I tell a story. I'm I've learned to be really big on storytelling, and
mhm.
and what's interesting about that is I'm finding, and I never thought I was a good storyteller, although I love being around storytellers. There's nothing better than being around a storyteller, right?
Yeah.
And but what I found is that people love hearing those stories. It's almost like it gives them a second to breathe.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. I love storytelling when leaders are sharing their own journey. It connects them again. It makes them seem more human. So 100%.
Yeah, and I think that this also works in your house, right? So, you know, your spouse is a good example. I mean, how many times does I had a conversation the other day with somebody and I said, "Why does my wife come to me in the fourth quarter of the game with 2 minutes left to go? We can't, you know." And then so even whether you're you know, I just gave you an example of talking with somebody about a review at work. The same thing applies for, you know, a husband and a wife team, you know. You you can't be shouting at each other all the time and expect that things are going to work out in the end. So the same principles that apply at work really apply at home in terms of
Mhm,
building relationships and that communication style
mhm,
of listening and
mhm, mhm.
communicating, I think.
Yeah, I remember reading, I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head, but it was basically a study of what married couples stayed married the longest, and they studied their communication patterns, like observed them communicating. And the short of it was the ones that were still married, like 20 years later, were the ones that were communicating more, communicating with empathy, seeking to understand a lot of these leadership themes that we've talked about
Yeah.
already, versus those that were really not saying a lot or not listening. And it's really trying to see it from the other person's perspective, because if you think about, two working professionals going to work each day, you come back, how was
Yeah.
your day, honey? How many people don't listen to that response, or just like they just want to hear it was fine, right? Versus someone like, oh, tell me more, that didn't go well, like what, tell me more about that. Like I think it's all communications, everything is communications.
I've learned to ask for more because I'm like, "Oh, I'm learning from this. This is awesome."
Tell me
I
more. You
Yeah,
can't
tell me
apologize.
more. How did you deal with that? Yeah, you know, I probably wasn't good at that middle part of the marriage, to be perfectly honest, but I've learned that, you know, there's so much that you can learn by hearing how somebody's day went that's, uh, applicable. Maybe it's because I just love talking business. I don't know. But Susan, before as we start to wrap up today, I'd be remiss to ask you, you know, we talked about a number of different leadership things, but is there something that we didn't touch on that you think would be applicable to men that may be listening to this podcast today?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I would just highlight that if any of your listeners, men listening or women, want to learn how to coach their employees better,
Mm,
we have a coaching skills for managers public program. It's training, one-on-one coaching, group coaching, but the intention is to build that skill in 14-hour program, virtual program. And powerupleadership.ca, coaching skills for managers. You can find it on our website. I'm happy to send you the link if you want to put it in the show notes. But it's such an important skill for retaining employees, coaching them so they feel heard, so
yeah.
they develop, so they stick around, and you retain them in your organization.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Coaching, creating a coaching culture, not only in your organization, but in your own home is so critical and really comes down to asking powerful questions. And so I encourage people to create a coaching culture wherever they're at. Create it in your church, create it in your
Mhm.
home, create it in your office. And so, well, yes, we'll put all that in the show notes, Susan, and encourage people to go find that and help them create the culture. Thank you, Susan, for coming on the True Man podcast today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me as well. Thank you so much, Mike, for having me on and wishing you all the best. I want to see a picture of that golf simulator once you have that set up.
Well, maybe I'll show you after the podcast. We'll flip the camera around. All right. Thanks, Susan. Enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.